Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Thomas Van Kampen once again, and here I am back in Toon Boom, no longer in Photoshop, and there's a bit of a reason behind that, which I'll get into. When I left off, I was working on the woman running project, and the idea behind that was to give the woman kind of comic book lighting and that kind of art style to it. And I tried to make the background match, but with like decent shading and everything. And I tried to make it look as much like a comic book as possible. I uploaded a sort of prototype version of that to YouTube. I'll put a link in the description and somewhere on the video box if you want to check that out. And I said it was open to critique because the background kind of bothers me a little bit, and I think the reason is that the brush in Photoshop is quite different from the brush in Toon Boom, obviously. While the brush in Toon Boom is a bit harder and curves a bit more, the one in Photoshop is a bit blurrier, which makes sense. I mean, it's a tool specifically made to alter photos, and so having really hard lines, cartoony lines like the ones in Toon Boom would be counterintuitive, and thus the backgrounds and the animated pieces generally don't blend well. And right here, I'm doing an experiment to combat that. You may have noticed I integrated a forest background into my Toon Boom animated bit, and I'm drawing some black lines over it. My idea is that if I can export a picture, just export the line work from Toon Boom and integrate it into Photoshop, if I make a layer like that where it's just the Toon Boom lining, then maybe, and then I can color in everything with a bottom layer in Photoshop and shade everything and stuff like that, then maybe it'll come out better and it'll blend way more with anything I animate in Toon Boom. So that's the idea. I'm going to try and do the line work in here. I'm going to try and put it in Photoshop. I'm going to try and color it in, and then I'm going to try and bring it all right back here. So hopefully that works out a bit better, and if it ends up working really, really well, what I might end up doing is I'll probably redo the background in the woman running animation. And yeah, even though that one was quite time consuming, I'm not gonna lie, like that background, even though you don't see very much of it, I kind of went overboard with that, to be honest with you. That background honestly took me like 3 days to make, and I'm still not satisfied with it, so I might just make it again. But, you know, that's kind of how you learn animation. That's how you learn anything, really. It's trial and error. Putting so much work into something that might not pay off, and then learning from your mistakes and doing it again and making something better. But yeah, so that's pretty much what I'm doing here, and this background isn't just going to be an experiment. If it turns out really well, I'm going to put it in another piece of my demo reel. The idea I have for this foresty background is that I'm going to do one of those kinds of shots in movies. You know, the kind where a guy is like spinning around in like a 180 shot and a background is scrolling past him? I'm going to create an illusion like that where it kind of looks like a panning 180 camera shot where it's rotating around the character, if that makes any sense. And the idea behind the spin on it is like the scene is basically going to be a hiker in the forest. He's going to be climbing over like an edge of a cliff, and he's going to look really exhausted and stuff, and then he's going to have like a really surprised look on his face, and that's when the 180 and like the 360 shot like pans around him and stuff like that. I apologize if my Facebook notifications are coming up on the microphone. I'm getting a couple of messages right now, but regardless. So yeah, that's what I'm doing. And there's not much else to that. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I kinda just want to talk about Pokemon in this one. Pokemon is a game I've recently been getting back into. I'm not talking about any specific like handheld official Nintendo game like Pokemon X and Y or anything like that. I'm talking about a fan-created website called PokemonShowdown.com. I'll put a link to that in the description because it's really cool. basically what it is it's a site that lets you create your own competitive Pokemon team. So you can put in any Pokemon you want, granted, if it's within a certain tier that you're playing in. And you can completely customize them right down to move sets, to EVs and IVs. You can customize their abilities, you can customize their items, and all that stuff. And it's super neat, dude. And the best part is, after you customize your own team, you can bring them online and you can play with other players. And there's actually quite a wide community on it, too. So, yeah, it's super fun. It actually has some of the sprites integrated from X and Y. And, yeah, it updates frequently. It's super cool, dude. That's basically what I've been doing on my spare time. And Pokemon is a game I have a love-hate relationship with. I say that because, on one hand, I think it's really cool how, like, surprisingly sophisticated it is, and that there's so many different ways to customize your team. There's so many different ways around, like, there's so many different strategies you can build your team around and stuff like that. It's super cool. There's all sorts of things like that. And and the thing I hate about it, though, is that some Pokemon are objectively better than others. And I know that's kind of the idea. Your Pokemon get stronger over time, and obviously some Pokemon are more popular by consensus than others. But a problem I have with Pokemon is that, like, a huge appeal of the game is to have your favorite out of hundreds and hundreds, right? But the problem is, some Pokemon are just so objectively better than others that like, why would you even have a certain Pokemon as your favorite when it's kind of pointless, especially if you wanted to make them viable competitively. Like, there are some Pokemon I love, but no matter how hard I try, I can't utilize them properly when I'm trying to play competitively, and it really frustrates me because I want to use them so bad. Like, Tropius is one of my favorite Pokemon. For those of you who don't know, he's a grass flying type. He's like that dinosaur with bananas growing on its neck. It's really cute and cool and stuff like that, and I love kind of the goofiness of it. And even though he's a decent grass type in the Hoenn region games like Ruby and Sapphire and stuff, he's just really not useful competitive-wise. There are so many better grass Pokemon you can pick, and that really annoys me, to be completely honest with you. Oh, what just happened right there? It just said, fatal error, this isn't a tagged file. This frustrates the hell out of me. So, one of the problems I frequently have with animating is that I use the cutter tool to edit bits and pieces. So if I draw some lines overlapping each other and I don't want them to be there, what I'll do is I'll use the cutter tool like I'm about to use here, and I'll try to edit those out, because it ends up being much cleaner and much more accurate than erasing, because when you try to erase, you leave some patches there by accident. But the problem with that is that oftentimes it'll just, for whatever reason, say this isn't a tagged file, so I don't know exactly what the reasoning behind that is. But it makes everything shut down, and it doesn't give you an opportunity to save. So this is part of the reason why you have to save as frequently as possible, because you never know when your software is going to crash for some stupid reason. And it's super annoying, dude. Like, I love this thing. Like, I wouldn't be able to make all the cartoons I made if it weren't for it, but man, it gets really frustrating. That's unfortunate, but luckily I save often enough that it doesn't become too much of a hassle. But yeah, it gets really annoying, dude. Anyway, back to Pokemon. There are some Pokemon that I can use rather effectively. My favorite water type, for instance, is Floatzel. Floatzel is cool because he has a water veil ability, which means he's immune to burn. If you try to burn him, he doesn't take damage over time, and his attack power isn't cut in half. So that's really cool. And not only that, but he's one of the faster water types you can get, and he has access to the move called Switcheroo, which switches your opponent's item with your item. So one of the things I like to do is I like to max out Floatzel's speed. I like to give him a flame orb, and I like to give him switcheroo. So that way, whenever I'm encountering a attack sweeper, what I do is I use switcheroo on them. So they get the flame orb. They have a permanent burn. They can't get rid of it in any way. The burn is just always there. And their attack power is cut in half. And I guess they can... No, even if they throw it or even if I knock it off or something, the burn is still there. But anyway... so yeah, they get a permanent burn. Their attack is cut in half, and meanwhile, I get their item, which is often useful for Floatzel, because like sometimes it's leftovers, which leftovers is always useful. So yeah, it ends up like really crippling attack. A lot of attack sweepers because now their useful item is gone, and now their attack is cut in half, and they can't get rid of it. So it ends up being super annoying for them. And not only that, but Floatzel is power enough to fend for himself. So he ends up taking down a lot of stealth rockers with an Aqua Tail. Even if he encounters a Pokemon that's faster than he is, he's a bit on the bulkier side, which is helpful. His stats are actually pretty balanced, which is helpful in taking some hits here and there. And he ends up taking down some stealth rockers like rather immediately and all this stuff. So yeah, he's quite good. I like Floatzel. He's a good Pokemon. I also like Torkoal. Torkoal is my favorite fire type. And he's quite underrated, I think, because he's a defensive fire type that actually works quite nicely in a lot of situations. For instance, he has Rapid Spin. I mean, he's not the best Rapid Spinner, obviously. There are obviously some that are just objectively better. But especially considering how he's one of the slowest Pokemon in the game. But yeah, he's quite good for that. And what I like about him is that he has a move called Clear Smog, which is a poison-type move that does minor damage, but its major thing is that it actually resets stat changes. So if the opposite Pokemon is using Bulk Up or Sword Stance or using anything to buff themselves, you can use Clear Smog to reset their changes, and thus you save your team from just getting totally swept, which is super useful. It's a poison type move, so it doesn't work against steel types, unfortunately. But it's super cool. And Torkoal is one of the 3 Pokemon, I think, that's actually able to use it. I can't remember the other one that's able to use it, but it's another fire type. So yeah, that makes him very useful. So yeah, there's that. And he also is quite defensive, which is nice because he's one of the few fire types that can take an earthquake, which is very helpful. Yeah, so Torkoal and Floatzel are some of my favorite Pokemon. Trevenant is really cool. Trevenant is one of the new Gen 6 types, and he's quite effective. Because he's got enough bulk to him to survive a lot of things, and he has really good setup. He's got Will-O-Wisp, he's got Leech Seed, and he can usually outstall most Pokemon. And he's a Ghost type, so he can block Rapid Spinners if you like to set up Stealth Rock and stuff like that. And he can switch in on a lot of fighting types, obviously. And he has a lot of opportunity for anybody switching in on him. So he can Leech Seed them, he can Will-O-Wisp them, he can use Foul Play, which can be quite effective against Psychic types and pretty much anything that has a high attack stat. And he has Horn Leech, which helps him get some health in return, and is a physical move, which panders to him. So yeah, Trevenant is also a really good one. And all of these are on my primary team, basically. So yeah, and one of my favorite Pokemon for sentimental reasons is Onix. Onyx is, fun fact, the very first Pokemon I ever saw in the show. It took me a long time to start playing the games, mainly because I just never had them as a kid. And I watched the TV show most of the time, and the very first episode I ever saw, I distinctly remember this, is the episode where Ash tries to take down Brock, and Onyx ends like I caught it in the middle, so I got it after commercial break, and Onyx was literally the very first thing I ever saw. And I just thought it was really cool, and I just liked the idea of like giant rock snake. How can you go wrong with that? So yeah, Onyx is one of my favorites, and he's not the best Pokemon you can put on your team. I mean, Steelix is probably better, but one advantage he has over Steelix is that he's faster, which isn't saying much. He's still quite slow, but if you play in the RU, which is a rarely used tier, cool thing about Onyx is that he's actually one of the faster rock and ground types, if you can believe it. So he's actually one of the faster guys to get out Stealth Rocks. So, and he has Sturdy. So what I like to do is I like to get out Stealth Rocks, and then he can survive one hit at the very least, even if it's super effective, and then he just explodes. And he gets off whatever he can do. That's pretty much all that I use him for. He's an easy first switch in because he's the most expendable part of my team. And I basically just need him to get Stealth Rocks and explode. That's it. So yeah, he's quite useful for that. And he also has Roar, so if I don't want him to explode just yet, if he can chip in a little bit more, I like him to roar in other people, and they get affected by Stealth Rocks over time. So he can be quite effective like that. And one of the benefits to him not being fully evolved is that he can use the Eviolite item. The Eviolite item increases your defense and special defense if your Pokemon is not fully evolved. So Onyx already has super high defense, so the Eviolite already just makes him even bulkier, which is quite nice. And there's a lot of Pokemon who can use the Eviolite really effectively, like Togetic is one of the better ones. I think Munchlax is pretty good at using it. Vigoroth, it could probably use it. Yeah, just all those sorts of people. So yeah, it's quite effective, and I quite like it. And another Pokemon I like for sentimental reasons, even though I've tried using him in competitive and I failed, is Ledian. He's this cute little, like, ladybug boxer guy who, he's so cute and he looks really cool and stuff, and he seems like he would have potential, but he can't really do anything, which is such a shame. I want to use him so bad because I like him so much. I wish he would get an evolved form. He's one of those Pokemon I think that is prime for an evolved form. He should get one, thus, because that way you actually have more of a reason to use him and to raise him and stuff like that. I think if you were really clever, you could probably find a way to make him useful, but I haven't found a way to figure that out yet. Oh well, what are you gonna do? That's just the way of the game. So, yeah. I'm making this background quite big, and then I'm going to shrink it down so that it ends up being in the entire frame so I can export it properly. And yeah, and that way I can do the whole scrolling thing and test to see if it's long enough and stuff like that. So this looks pretty exciting. I'm pretty excited for this. Hopefully it'll turn out better than my last background that I tried making in Photoshop strictly. So yeah. I think that's all the time I'm going to use for this one. Thank you guys so much for listening in. I'll see you guys in the next video. Okay, see you later.